Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we near the end of 2023, I'm reminded of how contrasting this time of year can be for those around the world. You don't have to go far. You can just look at the TV and watch what's going on. Um, Families, broken families, those who are at war at the moment, those who are struggling, those who are without. Another contrasting idea is um, families coming together. Maybe it's been a long year. Some of the chairs are now empty. Some of the people in our lives didn't make it, are not going to make it to 2024. This reality in itself shows that this time of season of joy and reflection can be also sometimes almost full with regret, despair, and what one does not have anymore. And part of the way we express these stories, whether they're stories of joy, stories of something that we are hopeful for, or something we regret, there are stories. And a lot of times we learn, and stories provide an element that facts do not. Um, it includes the character, in most cases, people that matter to you. So stories can provide a level of understanding and possibly even move that individual towards some hope, some healing. Last month we discussed the importance of building a home and the difference between the verbiage of a house and a home. And how there's some intangible kind of elements when we say a home versus just a house. Today we're going to discuss and remind ourselves the importance of stories. I remember when, and I'll share this a little bit more later, how this podcast kind of started, and it was my story recovering and having stories about individuals who were able to get through some of the roughest parts of their lives. But as we begin, and I know those who are listening may be feeling pretty down right now. Maybe it does feel like everything's very bleak and you can't see it getting better. I want to start off by encouraging those who are listening to please find help. Wherever you are in the world, I know it's easier said. Some places have more resources than others, but I don't like to reinvent the wheel. So if you are with family, friends, somewhere that you can ask these three words: I need help. Um, you may not be where you want to be or where you feel you should have been, but during this time of year, I would encourage to be kinder to yourself. A lot of these issues may take longer than you would like. However, if you are facing a crisis where you want that you don't feel safe with yourself, I do encourage you to find um, help. Uh, Disclaimer: if you are in the United States, and there's many different ways to seek help, but one of the ways is 988, the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, available to those in the States. But if you go to Rob or you frequent, and if you trust someone, if you feel you can just say, hey, I'm not doing so well today. I haven't been doing so well for months. I don't know what to do. Start there. Um, I know today I will be wrapping up this, this month, this theme, and just reminded of, um, of when I thought about this month a couple of years ago when I was starting this podcast. I felt it was important to do, and in a way that is relevant for anyone who is listening. Um, the Revive Ministry Podcast, despite its name, is not one to proselytize. I was speaking to a good friend of mine recently. I like to draw up the derivative of why I do this podcast, reflecting over the years. And really is so at the very, I guess, basic level. I would say this podcast is trying to provide a platform for those conversations we don't want to usually have. So, our topics. The idea is that I felt inspired to say, um, problem is already there. So, um, hope and my vision of reviving the idea, reviving those conversations we try to shoo under the rug. We're trying to not have because they're difficult, and I find that silence can be loud when conversation is not being had. So, looking back and remembering this month, I thought I wanted to address, and I'm still addressing, contrast of this month and time of year. Um, in the basic um, idea of coming together as family, seeing relatives, or not seeing relatives who are all. So, with that platform, with that starting point, I use this quote for those who are guests this month. I even used it last month. I felt it was just so open ended and very deep, kind of think about what it may mean in our lives. It's from George Moore. He says, a man travels the world over in search of what he needs and returns home to find it. Um, the old homage that, some of the things that we are searching for is right in front of us. But that distance, or that that searching element is necessary, in the sense that I could tell someone this will be good for you, but that individual has to come to that understanding. It kind of makes um, the idea of our stories and how we find hope a more intentional one. Um, I jokingly remember when I was in military, sometimes we were a lot of times going to have to kind of put our technical orders or while we were working on whatever equipment on craft or whatnot. And a lot of those instructions weren't as accurate, and um, a lot of times, you find a way to make it work. Uh, so I feel the same way when it comes to our lives. When we're traveling, we're trying to find, searching for purpose, searching for meaning. Some of our guests month touched upon it, about the importance of purpose, the importance of gratitude. these words are, coined a lot, but I could say, quote, may seem inspiring, but there's just because you've just because an individual may find it true or even interesting, it only really means something if if that quote or understanding becomes something that matters in your story. So very individualizing each experience. I remember at the very beginning when I started even the idea of Revive Ministries, I told my story. And those who are listening, if you actually go to the website, which I feel I want to work on updating it, there is a portion of it, the about portion. And, I was, like I said, in the Air Force. I did have issues, and I had to find my way. And, I feel very grateful for the support I have now. Hindsight is always 2020. Um, and also, I began to realize now, working in the mental health field and also reflecting on my own journey, um, that individualized care, individualize what's happened to you, individualize culture, and how that plays. So someone's emergency may not seem like an emergency to someone else. Someone's story may not seem to make much sense to someone else if you draw away the cultural part of it, draw away the individual. So a lot of times I remember um, one of the biggest complaints, even for myself, I felt, or later on working with in this field, is not feeling heard. A story at times can make or have that ability to have a person feel heard. Um, one of the questions I asked the guest was, what elements of understanding of your story help you move forward? Um, I feel understanding that not everyone's going to understand, and that's okay. Um, we are in a world today that used to say how when someone else said, "How are you?" you would say, "Okay." Now it's more, "How are you?" Busy. Um, and after COVID, I do, and during the time of um, global isolation in some regards, some areas, of course, increased the ability of being more. At least I just feel on the church side of things, and they had to be more relevant on the live stream because a lot of their congregations were at home. How do they continue to connect? However, another element, um, I feel um, it was more difficult. So thinking about my story, what has helped me move forward is understanding and being present and taking the time to ask questions. So I talks with myself, um, but also understanding that, uh, I used to say that it's kind of funny. I've been saying it recently, on and off. Humans are both exceptional and unimpressive at the same time. I think we are. There's, at least for me, thinking about my story, I'm sure those who are listening, those who are had maybe a tough upbringing or something has happened. Um, there might be cringe moments of some of the decisions you have made. I'm thinking about of even my decisions I have made, and it's kind of, and even for me, I had to go through the idea of forgiving myself and being kinder for myself. Um, but I realized real quick and that avoiding avoiding a situation regarding, say, an area of my life that I don't really, it's not priority right now, or I'm doing fine and everything else, doesn't really help in moving forward. And also with stories is, there's always going to be elements of, at least I remember, of sadness or anger towards something that has happened. Um, and again, I cannot speak for anyone else but myself, but I have to take a lot of time of not only forgiving myself, or forgiving those people, or forgiving the time, or understanding kind of the limitations at that time and of understanding. Um, and what did not help me, well, when I got stuck on the should haves. These people should have done this. Why doesn't this happen to me? And there's always this kind of coin, like, victimhood and all that stuff. But I feel that there, us as humans, there are times that we all feel like a victim. A lot of times, it may even feel exaggerated later on when you look upon it. I feel it's all process, at least from um, my history and how I remember it. Each one of them prompted me to move forward and understand my story in a more fuller way. Um, um, so a lot of times we only have one angle, and I understand why I would be really upset at that angle. However, um, I, when I took more time and I realized that no one will understand what I went through, it actually became freer and allowed me to look at my story and what I've been through in a more um, non-constrictive way. It's that in itself has helped me kind of look at my story and look even at some of the elements that were cringy and ask the more deeper questions of why. I remember just recently thinking about connections. A lot of times we emphasize connections without actually asking the right question. Um, and some of these questions will not be answerable yet, given the context of what I've been through. It, and it hasn't changed before. I may not feel very connected for around those who are my peers. And if I really look back and kind of put myself in the third person view, that's understandable. However, sometimes we trick, at least for me, my mind to think that that is unfair. And sometimes we take extreme measures in our thoughts, and that can be highly toxic at times. But um, I choose to not just react and to think first. Everything's on the table, and I think another thing that help understand my story and help me move forward is to allow that fluidity of mistakes. Now, we don't. You just ask any police officer or anyone accounting a car accident, you get totally different kind of statements. It's not that anyone's really untruthful. It's just that perception can really alter given the person's feelings. At least I could say for myself, I could feel that has. I do feel more freer because I accepted that not that people don't care about me or don't care about what I'm going through. It's that the level of understanding that I'm expecting is unreasonable. And that took a lot of time and reflection. There's this, I want to share this. I was reading about this. And I will put it in the notes. So if you want to check out this, kind of copy and paste it, some of these things from this website. And I thought it was intriguing. And I want to share with you some of the things I've done myself. It's called perceptual positions. It's an exercise that roots from NLP and an amazing way to build for things. And before we go forward, a lot of acronyms. So NLP I want to share is neuro linguistic programming, and the set of principles and techniques aimed to enhance self-awareness, boost confidence, build communication skills, and motivate people to positive social action. So one of the first things is your own first self-awareness. It can help better understand our own perceptions of the world. Second, empathy, better understanding others. Third, strengthen the objective view on the situation. Fourth, discover new possible cognitive perceptions and insights to any situation or relationship. Yeah. As such, is deemed to be a great exercise to use in related related communications, presentations, skills, active listening, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, leadership, or anything else. I'm sharing this because during my recovery and healing from what I was going through, I did a lot of mindfulness, and I do um, the tapping a bit when I do deep breathing, progressive relaxation. All these things have helped in their own way. Um, However, one of the things that has helped once I get stuck, and granted, if you was to address some of these things in a more deeper way. Obviously, if you are, like I said, beginning in crisis, it's not time to just practice this and try to solve it yourself. Um, I do encourage you to get professional help in this, but this is just sharing some avenues of when we think about perception and how we may be able to address it. Like I said, I'll put this link to some of the resource I did get some of this information from. However, everyone's situation, like I said, culturally, background, will not respond all the same. Um, and also our communications and lack thereof and our connections are sometimes skewed in how we see or how healthy we feel it is or how unhealthy it is. And sometimes our actions towards it is minimal or non-existent. If you don't like, if you don't feel it's a problem, then it will never be addressed. Um, Robin Sharma said, "We live in a world where many of us have a lot of friends on Facebook, but yet we have lost human connection. One way to connect, like in the title of uh, this series this month theme, is through our stories and experiences. I think about the cinema, I think about some of the notable things that draw people together is our stories. So uh, I'm reminded that stories have that ability and that element, finding a little bit, finding some direction, some way of connecting to the world. I do encourage. Um, Sometimes I don't do it as much for now, but before I used to journal. Journaling can be helpful. Some people adopt to it more than others, but especially when I was at my lowest of lows, I do remember journaling can be cathartic in the way that at that time I felt no one wanted to hear me. So at least is an avenue to cathartically put down on paper what some of the thoughts, feelings, the struggles I was going through. and there's several different ways I found to be helpful. That it's really just addressing what is really on the top, I guess, the complaint. One of those complaints, like I've said before, is inability to connect. Um, Sandra Bullock actually says, as connected as we are with technology, it's also removed us from having to have human connections, made it more convenient to not be intimate. Um, I feel this is unfortunately the trend that we are going towards. Um, Things are convenient, and convenient doesn't always equal efficient, but we like to tend to say it is. It is convenient to text, I cannot make this appointment, I can't make this gathering, but is it efficient to the person's relationship or friendship? Probably be best to speak to the individual later about, you know, just to, but it's not so much like every situation is different. It's just a dependence on finding the easier way to connect. And again, the conveniency and how we connect doesn't always equate to efficient connections, at least from my experience. One of the questions I asked uh, some of my guests, what has helped you stay connected to your story and others? Well, I mentioned writing it down, and also just being more intentional about your surroundings. I kind of remind myself um, there's a time and place to talk about these things. And sometimes, if a person's really busy, or just your spouse, a friend, however, maybe it's just it may be helpful to actually say, "Hey, I have something I would like to share with you. I know right now there's time. Is there time for us to do that?" Um, it seems so simple, but sometimes we just don't. We just feel well, they don't. They're they're never available. So I just can't. And sometimes this is duality of how we think things will turn out. It's either or. But sometimes if we don't, um, what I find helpful in regards to this, to stay connected, is to understand there's always usually a third arm, and it just takes a little bit of flushing out. Granted, context and how it's with you will be different from everyone. I think Chinu Chibi, I apologize if I realize the name, but I love what this quote says. It says, nobody can teach me who I am. You can describe parts of me, but who I am and what I need is something I have to find out myself. I kind of go back from the beginning. I know I use different contexts from November, but when I think about this quote and then you put on the side of this quote, it for me it kind of saying the same thing. Um, some for me going around the world or traveling the world over in search of what he needs. That in itself is sometimes the process of um, finding out what one needs. And I feel if it's one thing is there's this countdown or sense of urgency how long this process will take. And I try to encourage myself and those who I work with that it takes the time it takes. Sometimes if we are worried, at least what has helped me is if I'm worried about a deadline or how long something is taking, then I'll try to put something that's measurable to how you say, to go back and reassess how this item of my life, this area of my life is doing. So I would say this part of my life is not going so well. But I'm gonna try this thing and see if this thing may help. But I try to go a little further is what I'm trying to say. I will say, I will, I'm gonna mark in my calendar and reflect on how much progress I've made in those 3 months or 6 months or 4 months. And it just keeps me accountable but more involved. And that in itself has helped me um well, it helped me be intentional in what I need. And what I need will change just like everyone else. Um, what would I want as we wrap this year, as we wrap up this month? What would you want people to be reminded of this December regarding finding hope in our stories? Um, that personalize, understand that you're just not against this. There is more context in you that a lot of times we give ourselves credit for. I would encourage those as a final thought to be kinder to yourself, but also forgive yourself. Put measurable goals. You gotta start small to get to something bigger. But don't only just focus on those milestones. I think a lot of times self reflection, finding ways you can take time and see, hey, am I doing this well? Hey, I'm not doing so well in this. And see if you could find some way or some solution through this, through your story. And your story, a lot of times will change as you go. Um, and thinking also about being intentional. So, you know, if it's, let's say it's a mental health issue that you're going through, treat it as you would a medical issue. And I've said this before, and it's not so much, you may be intentional with your mental health, but more on how it reflects on you. So if mental health drags on a little bit more than you would like, um, don't attach it completely to your value of who you are. See if maybe this medication didn't work as well, if you're taking medication, or if this therapy is not as helpful. Well, tell the therapist that you're finding you have some concerns. Have that dialogue. And also, if you can find a way cathartic, you can write down and express yourself. Sometimes there's a bottleneck of what's going on in someone's life. So there's a lot of elements, but it stems to this idea of personalizing your care. So whether it's mental health, substance use, whatever you're going through, family issues, personalize what that care. So that includes self care. On the other end of it, do not personalize external things that are out of control. Don't if you want to go to the beach one day and it rains, you won't say you won't personalize it against the rain because the rain should have known better to not rain at the beach. It's kind of ridiculous because rain is not a person. So even if it was a person, I would encourage you only try to focus on what you can control today, and especially if you're really struggling. I say this um, wholeheartedly. So if you are struggling, don't try to DIY. Okay. Get professional help. Find someone, or if you're scared to get professional help. At least tell someone that you need help. You don't know what to do. Talk to someone. Um, And yeah, those are the things I would like people to remember this month. Like I said, it's contrasting this month of what feelings that may be going around. I kind of remember, like I said earlier this month, in the episode, I remember my father. It was snowing up north. I looked at his face and like, man, he doesn't look too happy. How can he not look very happy? I'm a child. I'm off school, so obviously there was a very different kind of perception of what was happening. Dad was shoveling snow, and you know, I was just having the time of my life. So recognizing that perception and how we see things do shift, and, and sometimes um, being kinder of our memories, being kinder of those around us, and also finding ways to forgive. All these things can be helpful. Gratitude, of course, can be helpful. If you're able to self-reflect and be grateful for the things you have. On top of that, all those things are good, and those things may be good for those who are listening, but it may not click for those who are really, really struggling. I do encourage you, if you are struggling that hard and you are feeling um, that it's overwhelming, that you do tell someone you need help. Um, we're ending 2023. We're getting into 2024. It's amazing. This podcast started in 2019, and around this time of year, the podcast went through COVID. You know, and there was a lot of adjustment, and there'll still be a lot of adjustments as podcast keeps moving forward. I do want to say to all the guests who've come on this year, last year, I do appreciate you. And of course, I appreciate everyone who's listening. Those who, you know, who find value in this, I do feel kind of I'm not one who um but I would say this. I am glad that at least some of this stuff is helpful for those who are listening. And I just want to say thank you, listeners, for just being a part of this journey with me. Like I said, Revive Ministries is really just a platform for us to have the conversations that sometimes we don't want to have. Remember to stay updated with things Revive Ministries through various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Leaving you with this last quote. It's from Martin Luther King Jr. It says, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving."